mentality. It almost felt like by the time I was 15, 16 years old, most of the controversy that happened at the front door was with the security guards over securing. I mean, completely just I have memories of security just like taking snacks and just smashing them and throwing them in the garbage and just being kind of jerky because they could. And I would love to know, what is the vetting process for these security guards? Do they have training on how to work with children? What is their mental health status? How are they prepared for what it is like to deal with the very touchy hormonal state of high school children and not to respond like a high schooler themselves? Because if a 16-year-old girl says something smart mouth to you because she's trying to own into the classroom, which is something 16-year-old girls do, I will hope that the adult, this person is there to protect this child, will not respond like a child and get right them. And now we have a situation which I have literally been a part of as the student, and I've seen many times as, just an observer and a parent in there. So I'm not against it. I just think that the vetting process for anybody who is supposed to be protected children, it needs to be a process, and there needs to be some background to it, because schools right now, they need them so badly. I have people that used to be students who are security guards, and I know they're not qualified.
Thank you, Robin, for that. Excuse me. There's a lot of that I would definitely agree with myself, but I want to move the conversation on to how schools should be handling security. We talked about the double doors to get in. You have to be maybe buzzed in. Maybe there should be a camera on the bell, on the doorbell, so that the secretary, whoever buzzes them in, can see who's coming in. One door for entrances, another door to exit. Maybe a rotation during the day to make sure those doors are locked. No one can get in. Make sure they're locked. The story in Uvalde, I still don't know if they got to the bottom of it. Was the door locked? Was the door not locked? And how about cameras in the schools? Cameras at the doors, maybe during in certain corridors or lunchroom. Maybe have cameras there. Mm-hmm. Intercoms at different locations throughout the school. How about having intercoms in each classroom? Any ideas, thoughts? Dan.
So we can harden a school. We can put in doors. We can put in all these kind of things. We can have armed guards if we so choose. One of the things is a lot of the places that have these kind of problems also don't want to fund any of this. I think Karen alluded to that. But we also have to make a decision as a society. If you go into the teaching profession, is your job now to take a bullet for your kids?
Hell no,
maybe it is. Maybe it is. No, but that's what we're asking right now.
Because President Trump wanted teachers to be armed with guns.
So if a teacher is armed, okay. So police who would come into a situation like this, obviously in Uvalde they didn't do it well, but when they come into a situation like that, they have constant training. If you are a teacher, do you have constant training? Do you have time for that? Do you have constant training? No.
No.
If you decide to shoot back, a lot of schools have very thin walls. Where's that bullet go? So, we can harden. I think we should have cameras. We should have intercoms. We should, have secure doors that can be checked, even from a central place. I think those are all good, because the reality of it is that we have to protect ourselves. The same reason I have a lock on the front of my house. Unfortunately, there's some bad people out there. But as I said earlier, I think as a society, we've decided this is okay. I don't think we've consciously decided we're okay, and I don't think anybody on this panel thinks it's okay. But I think as a society, by our actions, we've decided it's okay.
I want to go back to something that Robin said, because October is anti-bullying month. And over the last few years, I've been having conversations about bullying in different schools. Of course, most of them have been on a virtual platform, of course. But I did have a chance to go into some of the schools prior to the pandemic, and the schools that Robin was talking about on the west side of Chicago. And going through metal detectors, it felt like prison to me. It felt like, really, going into a court building, or when you got to go through the metal detectors and you got to strip down and this, that, and the other, people looking into your bags and stuff. It didn't feel to me like school. That's not the school I remember. And how does that rub off on the kids that have to go through that process? I mean, now you being searched, now you being, patted down perhaps. Now you have to go through metal detectors. You got to answer questions, have things taken away from you. How does that make the kids feel? Is that adding to their stress? I would say yeah. Questions? Anyone?
I think so. I remember my senior year, my junior year of high school, I remember being very anxious about going through security and going through the pat downs and the backpack checks and the purses checks, because I was getting ready to take ACTs and I didn't want to be late. I'm trying to get into school for free. I needed a good score on this test. And I remember the anxiety of that. And just anytime there was an important date at school, any important exam, any important test, or just, wanted to take that extra time and hang out with my friends, it created an anxiety for the rest of the day of how long it's going to take. How is security today? I hope they're in a good mood. I hope no one's, has an attitude. Try to ignore that. How are the other children going to behave? It created an atmosphere for almost like a prison. It was one of my least favorite memories of high school, is going through security every day.
I would have to agree. One of our middle schools that I have a garden at they tore down a 5-story building that was kind of a Roman architecture, big pillars, and they tore down this brick building and built a brand new facility. And they built the school for 750 middle school students, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. And they actually have 950 students going to that school. So it's overcrowded, to say the least. Every time I bring a visitor to tour the garden at the school, I ask them to tell me what the new school, the architecture of this new school. I go, what does that school remind you of? And everyone tells me the same thing. It reminds them of a prison with the same vertical windows that are really thin, and the same really sort of nondescript brick outer structure. And I'm like, this school looks like a prison, I don't know how the designer comes up with these things, the architect, but somehow that's got to have an effect on a certain community, especially communities that, like the neighborhood that this particular school is in, is a neighborhood that was hugely affected by the war on drugs, for example, which we know is a war on people and a war on minorities. And almost an entire generation of men were taken out of this community and put in prison for minor drug offenses, you might say. And then the school itself looks like a prison too. And I just find it to be really odd that we have that disconnect. And sometimes schools are run more like prisons than they are like schools, in my opinion, unfortunately.
So my next question, and Mark, very good observation. My next question is, because I don't know the answer to it, so I'm going to throw it out there. Are schools in the inner cities looking more like prisons than schools, let's say, that are suburban? Is this something that's going on? I've never been, I haven't been in many schools in the suburban areas, so I have nothing to compare it to, but maybe someone can answer that for me.
Absolutely, it's different. My school in my hometown looked way different than my school here in Chicago. My brother's school, he went to Lane Tech, looked way different than my school on the west side of Chicago. It was divided into houses. It was like house A, house B, house C, house D. And all I thought to myself was block A, block B, block C, and block D. It was like prison block. It was dark and dismal, and it looked just like county.
One of those things that make you say, Charlie, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's in part because, again, there's inequity in the funding for a school that has those issues as opposed to a school that does not have those issues. I don't have an exact statistic on that, but I think there's a correlation between that. So that school would say is in the city, doesn't have the resources that school in the or the tax base, because it's based a lot on tax base, as a school in the suburbs. And I know a number of schools in my area that are very well off, you know, and they're considered highly regarded and everything like that. So I think that is probably part of the issue, that perhaps there is a need to to find a way, and it's not probably through, because schools are generally funded locally. I mean, they receive money from the state and they may receive money from the federal government, but it's also based in the neighborhood, the area they're in, the economics within that neighborhood. Right. And there's probably a correlation with that.
All right, thank you. We're going to end this segment in just a second, but I want to give JD the last word. JD, any last thoughts on school security, mass shootings? You're on mute, JD.
Sorry about that. We've got a long way to get this whole issue rectified. I mean, there's for every way we're trying to get things, put into, prevent some of this stuff, it's actually, there are parts of it that could run the risk of making it worse. And we just got to figure out that whole mishmash, if you will, on how it's going to be, how we're going to have to get this problem solved.
All right. And to summarize again, at the bottom of all this is funding. Schools need more funding. Teachers need more money.
Yes.
We need more work in mental health, more in anti-bullying. I think a serious, just like buildings, different office buildings have a business continuity plan in case, there's a power outage or whatever. I think that these active shooter drills should be something that's actually thought out step by step by step, written down, put somewhere where people can read it, learn it, and practice it on a regular basis until it is like second nature. We're going to take a break right now, and when we come back, we're going to have a new segment for Diverse Talking Heads. This is going to be our round robin discussion led by one of our panelists. Stay tuned. And we are back. So now we're going to have our special segment. This is called the round robin discussion. And tonight it's going to be led by our panelist, Charles. Charlie, take the stage.
Thank you, Kelvin. So I thought about, he asked me to do this first, and I know many of the rest of you are going to be doing this in subsequent weeks. And I've been thinking about what subject to do. And yeah, I even thought about Queen Elizabeth, but I thought went back to my original subject, which we had talked about, some of us earlier as a possible show. And hopefully we can do this in a few minutes here. So what I would like to talk about is student loan debt. And I'm going to use a little analysis